Good morning, beautiful ones. Welcome to today's transmission. We will, in the next few minutes, be joined by our beautiful guest, Katie Rose, and we'll be chatting to you about womb and yoni healing and the power of doing this work in group with other potent women. I'm so excited for this conversation. Katie and I met before actually seeing one another 10 years ago. She came into my field through a yoga practice in a most exquisite way, and our journey continues to unfold with synchronicities that she doesn't even know about yet, which I'm excited to share in a moment.
Good morning.
Good morning, darling.
Hi.
Hi. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Me too.
You know, we don't talk about the womb and the yoni much in public. It's more of an intimate conversation with people. So let's do a quick welcome so that the people know who you are and who I am and why we're doing this work. Katie and I, as I mentioned before she joined us, I met her 10 years ago, and she didn't know that I had met her. I had been listening to a CD of hers that was given to me by the beautiful Monica Sayers, who was at the time my yoga teacher at Union Street Yoga in Erskineville. And I said to Monica, you know, this woman was changing my life. I said to her, I really would love to hear your voice on record. Could you record a set for me so that I can listen to you when I'm not at my three times a week practice? And she said, I can't do that for you, Lee, but I've got this. And she handed me your CD, your beautiful white CD with the blue mandala on it. And I listened to that practice every day, probably for about 4 years. Every morning I'd wake up at 5 a.m. to listen to your voice. And when you invited me to tea after our children had met one another in primary school, I didn't know who you were because your surname was different. And I remember sitting at tea with you going, there's something about this woman that feels really familiar and I can't quite put my finger on it. And it took me until arriving at home for everything to click when I looked at your book and then I saw the CD and it all made sense. And here we are 10 years later, about to create some magic together. So ladies and gentlemen, this is Katie Rose, and she is a women's wellness educator and mentor. And she's been doing this work for the past 25 years. What would you like to add to tell the people, my love, about who you are and what you're about?
Well, I mean, I think it's relevant when we're talking about womb work and yoni work. It's certainly relevant that I have 5 children. So that's a fact that's probably worth adding. One of whom goes to school, well, actually 2 of whom go to school with your boy, which is, you know, a beautiful serendipitous connection that we have. I've been doing this work for 25 years and it's so interesting. You know, when I think about who I was 25 years ago as a 20-year-old woman that first started diving into this work and who I am now, of course, there is so much change and difference and evolution and growth and transformation. And then there's also some elements that really haven't changed that much. There's a beautiful pathway for me of this work that has remained a very solid thread throughout my entire adulthood, really, and continues to. You know, I'm still doing this work, I'm still learning, I'm still growing and sharing. So yeah, a long journey, and at the same time a journey that is always unfolding and ongoing.
Amazing. What would you say to the women who feel the call to take the next step of healing, yet would normally consider the womb and the yoni as a practice that they would do privately in a more intimate setting and not in a group setting? What is it about the group coming together, doing the work that is so extraordinary and so powerful?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's a few things here. The first thing is that a good facilitator of any process or any journey will never ask someone to do something that they don't feel completely comfortable with. So I think the reason that a lot of women might, you know, have this feeling that, oh, this is actually private work, this isn't something I would want to do in a group, or even in a one-to-one situation with a facilitator, might be because they feel like perhaps they might be asked to do things that would make them feel uncomfortable, or it might feel a little bit exposing or overly vulnerable. And here's the thing, when we're working with womb work and with healing, the yoni work, it's all about consent, permission, feeling safe and feeling comfortable. Because if that's not the foundation of the work, then actually, honestly, all we're doing is we're adding to trauma. If I put women into a situation in group work where they feel like they have to say yes to something when their internal mechanism is saying no, well, that reflects often what happens in the bedroom, right? I mean, we have this conversation about consent, and consent is such a nuanced and multifaceted area in our lives. Like, you know, there's so much nuance between an outright sexual violation versus I'm in a loving relationship, I enjoy having sex with my partner, but on this particular occasion, in this particular moment, I don't feel like doing X, Y, Z. And yet I don't quite feel I have the voice to express that. And so I go against my intuition, my feeling, my gut instinct, my womb power, actually. And I just go along with it. I go along with it to keep the peace or to be kind to the other person or whatever the reasons are. And my body, my nervous system knows that that has happened on some level. And then every single time I've been in a situation where I haven't felt comfortable and I've gone with it anyway, and I've overridden my nervous system. And by the way, this is something that women do a lot more than men, like a lot more. It builds up and it builds up and it builds up until we get this situation where the body and the mind, or the intellect and the physical body, are not in union. They're not working together. There's actually a divide. And so what this work does is it brings that relationship back together so that I have full autonomy and sovereignty in my body, led by my femininity, my womb and my yoni, not led by a masculine kind of like the sword that cuts through, not that. The receptive, the open, the expansive, but fully empowered part of me. So to go back to your question, if in group work a woman is asked to or feels socially responsible to do, say, be a certain way that isn't in full resonance with her experience, then the work won't be healing. So for some women, if there's been a really deep trauma or there's something very active and alive in her that she's working through, one-on-one work might be more appropriate. Or even guided work that she will then do privately on her own. Like, we can provide guidelines and then that work can be done. But for women who have done a little bit of work on themselves, who know themselves, who are comfortable in their own skin, but want to go deeper, who know that there is some potency there that can be accessed to go deeper, then the group program, working together as a group, is such a beautiful way to dive into that. Because two things happen in the group. First of all, the collective energy is very potent. And so we, you know, a rising tide lifts all boats. We lift each other in that experience of healing and nurturing. And we do it not only for ourselves, but we do it for, really, I mean, it sounds like a bold claim, but we actually do it for all women. We do it for the collective. And then also, we have this experience of being guided through a process. And we all know that when there is a good guide in place for a journey that we're going through, whatever that journey is, whether it's learning a musical instrument, learning a new language, learning how to run a business, whatever it might be, when there's a good guide in place, we go so much further, so much more quickly. And so this is no different, you know, with good guidance, with potent, careful, well executed guidance, we can really do so much healing in a remarkably, like big shifts can happen in short time frames.
Mm. And what would you say about the alchemy that happens within the group? If we put the guidance to a side for a moment and we put the facilitators to a side for the moment and trust that that choice, as in this instant, you and I co-facilitating, and the way that it's curated, and you know what I'm like when it comes to experiences. And we also know that there are experiences out there that are not well curated. What would you say about that alchemy that occurs, the actual resonance that occurs between the women that then relaxes the nervous system before the guidance even begins, the actual being in space with one another, that drops them into a place that they wouldn't probably go with their intimate partners or in an individual situation? Are you in agreement with that, or is that too woo-woo?
No, no, I totally agree with that. And so again, there's a few elements to that. One is the actual space itself, and you are such an incredible space holder. I mean, I was saying to you the other day, I came over to your house and we had a cup of tea together, and I said, you know, I just walk through the door and I immediately feel like this sense of like, oh, it's like, yeah, like the nervous system just kind of drops into itself, because you create such exquisite space. And you do that, you know, in the material realm with beautiful things and beautiful you know, smells and like a beautiful sensory experience. But it's not just that. Actually, it's also an energetic capacity to really hold a safe space, and part of that is around boundaries too, and clarity in communication and clarity with boundaries. So all of that is part of it. But then when women come together, we have an amazing capacity, and I know you will have seen this in your life many, many times, even if we don't know each other, to go very deep very quickly when the conditions are right. Like, this is, I mean, in Indigenous culture here in Australia, they talk about women's business, right? Women's work. And that to me is an acknowledgement of the sacred capacity that women have when they come together in a group, and women of all ages and all walks of life and all different backgrounds and all different life experiences. We have a commonality. We have something that unifies us. And because we're women, we tap into that very quickly when the conditions are right, when the space is held. We can almost drop into that vortex. And I believe, and I mean, you want to talk about whether it's too woo-woo or not, I really believe this, that when we go into that very deep space, we actually call in all the women who've done this work before us, who are doing this work in collaboration to the sides of us, and the generations that will come behind us, so that we're not just healing ourselves. There's a pathway here. There's all of our ancestors. There's our grandmothers, our great grandmothers, and back through time, the healers, the wise women, the witches, the midwives. There's all of our sisters all over the world doing this work together with us in real time in these moments. The women who are birthing, the women who are holding space for death, the women who are working through their trauma. And then there's our daughters and our sons, you know, the lineage that comes up behind us. And so that's the potency of group work. That doesn't happen alone.
It's so delicious. As I was listening to your voice, I was traveling through time to the first circle that I sat in of this nature, and we worked with Yoni eggs, and there were 11 of us in the space, and I was traveling with Sarah Jane Perman in retreat in Ibiza, and so profound. She had a new baby. Her little boy was only just below 1 year old, and I was in the best suite of the villa with a pregnant woman and another woman, and it was just so beautiful to have the children in the space, one in a woman's womb and another that was traveling with us and journeying through the practices and the experience. And then we also had Sarah's mother. So the lineage, you know, the lineage was there. And although it wasn't, you know, it wasn't brought to attention on a regular basis. It was almost as if they were holding the space and we were there to do women's work. And the fact that we had those elements and people were in the state that they're in, and when I say state, I mean a pregnant woman, you know, the things that this woman did to get to the other side of the world, to be present for the work, was extraordinary. And what's unfolded from that moment in time for all of us is there are no words, and the work continues to happen. And this was 7 years ago. It continues to happen, and there are still things that are unfolding from that journey, and there are still things that are clicking in. It's so incredibly potent. And so when I hear, you know, this has become very normal for me, and I've been in my body through my life, and I've spent a lot of time naked, gotten into a lot of trouble with other women in the space because I've jumped in naked to the pool underneath, you know, underneath the moon with the boys. And I've just found this to be a very normal practice. In our society, it's not a very normal practice. And so when women say that they're not comfortable with doing the group work, and men will also say this when it comes to lingam massage and yoni massage in group. And I would really love for over time for this to be totally debunked, because we're actually in such a private space whilst in the collective. So to your mention of the intuition, of the mind not really connecting with the body, what is it about us humans, and not just the women, but what do you believe influences us not to listen to our intuition?
There's a few things there. I mean, first of all, I'll talk about body self-consciousness and our relationship with our bodies and our physical form. So some of that is learned behavior through our lifetime. Like, for example, your relationship to nudity will often have a lot to do with the way that you were brought up. So if you were raised in an environment where people were comfortable with their bodies in general, and, you know, being naked and nudity was acceptable, then usually that will be more normalized for you and you'll feel more comfortable yourself. That's one element. Another element is, I believe, really actually karmic and to do with how we've incarnated in this lifetime. You know, we bring in our own set of different codes. In Sanskrit, the yogic tradition, we call it samskara, various different imprints, which basically point to the stuff, the baggage that we're going to deal with in this lifetime. And for some of us, that stuff will be in the mind. It might manifest as a tendency towards depression or a tendency towards anxiety, or it could manifest as having a very outgoing and, you know, charming personality, for example. And then for some, it will manifest very much in the spirit realm. You know, some people come into this lifetime and they have a very potent, strong connection to spirit. They can channel, they can speak to the angels, they can draw down guidance, and it's in them, right? And then others, I think we can all learn to access that. We can all learn to develop different skills in different areas, but it may not be innate in us. And for some people, we incarnate and we have, for whatever reason, for whatever samskaras, a challenging and troubled relationship with our physicality. Those people will often feel, not always, but can feel like they're not meant to be here. You know, they feel almost a little bit alien, like they're not really fully comfortable in their own skin. And that can show up from really quite a young age. And often that will become very heightened in puberty. So when the body starts to change and transition in puberty, all these different physical changes happen, that relationship to self and to the physical body becomes really crucial. So the messaging that you get around that time, again, creates imprints and samskaras. I'm really interested in the pathway, the journey, particularly for women, from when we look at, for example, first menstrual cycle, the first time you ever experience a bleed, and then think about the first sexual interactions that you have, the first time somebody outside, like not your mother or, you know, a close family member sees you naked, what's the feeling vibration of that experience? What imprints did that create? The experience of losing your virginity, moving through childbearing years, the experience of being pregnant, birthing a child, what kind of space and container is held there? And then aging, moving into menopause, perimenopause, the elder years. How do we feel about the body changing, becoming older, grey hairs appearing, wrinkles, all of that? And so that entire journey from puberty to elderhood is imprinted in relationship to our body. And one of the biggest missions in my work, whether it's through physical yoga, whether it's through, you know, the mind, meditation, whatever it might be, and then this more, I guess you could say, more esoteric or energy-based work, which is really what it is. This is an energy-based portal, is about healing that relationship. It's about looking at the different facets of that pathway. And there will be some, often we focus on the trauma, right? We're kind of a little bit conditioned to focus on trauma. So there might be, for example, an incident in your past where some sort of sexual violation has occurred. That's very common for most women. Something has happened that has been very jarring for the energy body. But then we can also look at all of the beautiful, graceful, exquisite, delicious experiences that we've had, all of the orgasms, all of the joy, all of the connection. And in this work, we kind of move through that pathway and we recognize that it's always flowing and changing. Yes, there's trauma. Yes, there's challenges. Yes, there's experiences that we wouldn't want to have again. But there's also always beauty. There's always threads of joy, threads of pleasure, threads of desire. And so when we look at the journey in that much more holistic way, then we're able to start enjoying it for its deliciousness. And whether that includes nudity or, you know, some people are just more private. It doesn't mean they're not doing the healing work. They might just be a little bit more withheld, self-conscious. You know that expression, what's that expression? It's the quiet ones you've got to watch. Like some of the most healed and integrated people I know, when you first meet them, there's no particular awareness of that. But as you get to know them, the depth is so potent and clearly there. And then for others, you know, it's much more expansive, gregarious, expressive, like, you know, jumping into a swimming pool naked under the full moon with a bunch of people, and that's beautiful too. So we all have our own pathway, and neither one is right or wrong. It's just when we come into the center of ourselves, and also we can have different personas within ourselves, right? I mean, there might be times when you feel very bold and expansive and expressive, and other times when you feel very private and concealed and wanting to actually maintain a very clear boundary. And there's space for all of that.
And it's constantly coming back to, what do I desire? And am I meeting an edge here, or am I going against what's important to me? Or am I not considering something that could potentially be a life-changing moment for me? I believe that in this women's work, it's a call. It's a call, and you don't know quite what's going on, but there's something inside of you that is driving you so potently. Yet we are taught not to listen to our intuition. That's a crazy thing to do. What do you mean? Oh, it was your gut instinct. You had no data. There was no rational evidence to prove to you or to validate to you that that was the decision that you needed to make. Yet it's the decision that when we don't make it and when we don't listen to it, then everything unfolds in often a negative way. Katie, what do you think it is about this specific space that you've been in that has you? Yes, you've said there are the material elements that have you feeling like your nervous system just relaxes, and then there's the energy that I hold in the space. I had a woman stepping in the other day, and every time somebody steps through my door, they have commentary on it. And it's always so fascinating for me to observe. And this one in particular, she's a wild one. You know, she lives on the land, and she's really out in the nature. And she stepped through my front door, and of course was just so happy to be here. But as she walked up the spiral staircase, I saw her sort of pantering around and looking at the view over the water. And she looked at me and she said, "I feel different here. I am walking with my shoulders taller. I'm standing with my head up straight. I'm more aware of how I move through the space." And I said to her, one of the most important things that I do is I enable women to walk through life with more dignity. And it's so beautiful that you felt it within the first 5 minutes, that you've stepped in here and you're already feeling taller, your heart is more open, you've dropped into the space. So what do you think it is, other than the two elements that you've mentioned, what else exists in the space that we can potentially create a blueprint of for other people to create this space where people feel so relaxed and also so dignified?
I think that when we come into healing spaces, as well as freedom, self-expression, expansion, exploration, we also need a clear container. We need boundaries. And one of the things I know, I mean, just to speak about you specifically as a humanly, one of the things I know about you, which I find so fascinating, is that you are someone who has enormous freedom, enormous expansion, like a real wildness. But also, you are a woman who loves the spreadsheet and structure and form and absolute precision, crystal clear communication and clarity. And so when these two, it's the yin and the yang, right? In yoga, it's the hatha, the sun and the moon, Ida, Pingala, masculine, feminine. When these two sit together, that's when true safety is felt. Now, at the risk of, I mean, this is not going to be popular with everyone listening, but I'll just put it out there. It takes a man and a woman to make a baby, right? Or the masculine and the feminine, let's say, to biologically conceive a child. And when those two forces come together, the masculine and the feminine container is required for the human to grow into its full capacity, right? Doesn't mean it has to be a man and a woman, although, you know, biologically that's what the archetype is, but it needs the masculine and the feminine. It needs both. The safety, the container, the strategy, the boundaries, and the wild, fluid, expansive, spontaneous. And what I noticed, to be perfectly honest, in a lot of healing spaces, particularly when we move into the world of exploring tantra, sexuality, like the more kind of so-called taboo subjects, is actually the containers that are created are a little bit sloppy. They're a little bit loose. And so people who already have that wild freedom, abandoned, I'm up for anything in them, they feel great in those containers because they love that. That's safe for them. It's a great space to be in. But the ones who, and I'm like this, you know, I'm English. I was raised in the UK. I don't have body consciousness. I'm actually I could care less about nudity. It really isn't a problem for me. But I do have a reserve in me. Like, I'm definitely not a get it all out kind of person in every facet of my life. And so I can totally relate to that. Unless the container feels very safe, it doesn't resonate for me. Like, just to give you an example, I don't love, in fact, I loathe really wild, raucous parties. You know, lots of loud music and noise, like a nightclub situation, let's say, is like my least favorite place to be. I find it very intense for my nervous system. I feel self-conscious. It's just not my vibe, right? But in my own personal space, I love music, I love food, I love people, I love to be social. I much prefer an intimate group. So that's my preference, right? That's just me as a person. Give me a dinner party over a nightclub any day of the week and I'm happy. Someone else, my ex-husband, for example, he's a good example of this, would spend his whole life in a nightclub if he could. He loves all that stimulation and party and expression and getting dressed up and the whole kind of like intensity of it. So we're all different. Everybody has their own karmic thread, their own, you know, what it is that they need. But when we come to the healing space, when we're looking at trauma, when we're looking at consent, when we're looking at women's work of healing, yoni, womb, our femininity, our divine femininity, as well as the fluid space, we need the safe container. And it's really simple, actually. And I know a lot of women listening to this will be working in this area. You need to, as well as creating the beautiful work, you need to make sure people feel safe when they come into that space. And that's done through absolute clarity of communication. You know, the containers that you create. When you suggested we collaborate, for me, it was an instant yes, because I know in this work, and I would be so hesitant to work with so many people on this stuff because it's very sensitive material. But I know the spaces you create are safe because I know that you have absolute clarity and communication, and that's what's required. For the wildness to come out, first the safe space has to be there. Otherwise, we actually just create destruction and chaos.
Amazing.
And it could be as simple as, like, you know, sometimes the safety is felt. It sounds really silly, but actually this is the truth. The safety is felt when people know, what time is it? How much is it? Where do I have to go? What will happen? You know, will food be provided? How many people will be there? Like, these very simple things create the safe container, and then within that container the healing can happen.
And you know, it's fascinating that you say that, because also a characteristic about me is that people never ever know what they're going to get. There is a lot of unknown, there is a lot of mystery, yet what I often hear people saying is, I have no idea what's going to happen and I'm totally for it. And it's to your point that the essential details and the container is set, and the pieces of information that they need to have, they have. And that leaves me so much room for spontaneity. And everybody walks away going, oh, I didn't expect that. I don't think I've ever held a social gathering or a work-related gathering where people haven't walked away going, I didn't expect that. And for me, personally, it's important to normalize the unknown and for people to feel safe in the unknown, because this is what life's about. We don't ever know what's going to happen within the next 5 minutes. And if our nervous systems don't regulate to that, then how on earth do we create anything in our lives? And this is what the women's work is about. As you say, you need the masculine and the feminine to birth something, and we need to feel safe in that. So I'm so excited about what we're co-creating. It's called Receive 8, and it is a half-day womb and yoni healing retreat experience here in my sacred home on the hill that is on the Central Coast. It's just about 8 minutes off the Gosford turnoff. And we'll begin, it's a 10:30 arrival, starting at 11 in the morning. And it's on a Friday, on the 28th of July. And it'll probably be one of the most nurturing, nourishing, expansive experiences of your existence. And I can say this with absolute conviction. And the reason for that is because of the intentionality behind what Katie and I are doing, and what we're bringing into the space for each individual, and where we're focusing our energy from a collective perspective. And we are both mothers. And to be a mother doesn't necessarily mean that you have birthed a child out of your womb or out of your yoni. To be a mother means that you're holding the nurturing energy for yourself and for the people around you, and you're here to love. And so we're bringing heaps of that into the space. And we've just come through the 777 portal, which for me, I feel very wobbly through this week. And this week I've been ovulating as well. So it's been this surge of energy that's come through the body. I don't know how you've been feeling, Katie, over this week, as there's been this serious kind of, you know, earth connection that's been happening. What energy space have you been in?
Actually, you know, for me, it's been quite interesting because I've been in a deeply creative space. It's actually been quite earthing for me. I've been doing a lot of creation mode stuff and feeling very grounded. But part of that is just practical because my older kids have all been away. So I've had a lot more time and space than I normally do. I haven't been so intensively in the mothering zone, but yeah, I'm writing, I'm creating, I'm planning, I'm dreaming. That's where I'm at right now.
Amazing. That's the same space that I've been in as well. There's been a lot of creation and, you know, ideas, and you've seen me send messages through to you, and I've been moving things around and I've been feeling it in my body. But at the same time, I've had to spend a bit of time on the computer, and that has been unearthing. When I'm in these kind of energetic portals and in creation mode and bringing things forward, because it's about 3 weeks out now, if I'm on the computer, it doesn't work for me. So also bringing that into the space of how our wombs and how our yonis and how our minds all connect and disconnect with one another based on our externals and based on the digital world. I think there's going to be a bit of juiciness coming through around that too. Is there anything else that you would like to add for the women who are called to this work and the women who might have thought that they're not yet called to this work? Who would you say this work is for? If you had to imagine the perfect 8 in the space, what would you say?
I always look for diversity. For me, there's such a great joy in, you know, something that is not homogenous in terms of the group. So my greatest joy is always a diverse group, you know, different body shapes and sizes, different ages. I think I said to you when we first decided to do this offering, I would love a mother and a daughter. There's something so potent about that in circle, like having a woman and her daughter, whether it's a teenage daughter or even a slightly, you know, it could be a mother moving into menopause with a slightly older daughter, whatever. But that dynamic of the mother and daughter doing healing work. And I have a daughter now, so I'm already thinking, she's only 1.5, but I'm already like, can't wait for you to come to women's circles with me, sister. Because there's something so beautiful about that. And the other thing I'd like to just add as well around what the actual work involves, apart from just the logistical side, is, you know, you might be coming in with an agenda. You might be feeling like, okay, I had this trauma happen, or I had this experience, or there's this blockage, or, you know, my libido is really low, I don't enjoy sex, or I don't feel good in my body, whatever it might be. You might be coming in with something that you're thinking about in terms of like, some healing would be great in this area related to feminine sexuality, reproduction, etc. And actually the very first thing that you'll be invited to do when you come into the space is to let go of that agenda and just put it to the side. And instead of coming in with this mind idea of, I want to heal this, I've got this going on, blah, 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 we just drop into the body. So there'll be a lot of somatic experience. There'll be some journaling. There'll be some guided visualization. There'll be some placing of the hands, you know, hands on the heart, hands on the head, hands on the womb space. We're going to use clay, Indigenous Australian clay, on the womb as almost like, imagine a face mask, but like a womb mask. So this is a beautiful, beautiful practice that works on earthing and anchoring and drawing our energy into a portal of the body that often doesn't get much attention. You know, we talk about thinking and always will come to the mind, but actually we can think from the womb if we really integrate ourselves into the body in that way. So that will be part of the invitation. And then we're also going to use smoke. We're actually not going to do steaming in this particular group. We're going to use smoke as a method of cleansing and clearing. And one of the reasons I love to do this is because it's indigenous to Australia. So Aboriginal culture has used smoke for yoni clearing and cleansing for thousands of years, literally thousands of years. And smoke has such a potent effect on releasing and letting go. So once we've really like worked into what is it I'm ready to let go of in this moment, and again, that might surprise you, it might not be what you thought when you came in through the door, we'll be using the smoke as part of a cleansing and clearing ritual to really drop into that place of release and letting go. It's going to be an exquisite container with very clear attention to detail to guide you through a process. And I think pretty much the only thing we can guarantee is that you'll come out the other side after 4 hours pretty transformed.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited. And we're holding the group circle in a different space of my home as well, that is even more contained, yet with all of the sunlight shining through as well. So I'm very excited. I've been moving around the space, and I've been looking at all of the different angles of what people would experience when they're lying, when they're sitting, the different times of the day as things move through. So yeah, I'm so excited. I'm so excited for this work, and I do honestly, with time, hope to normalize this work. As we talk about the mind, and we go for back massages, and we go for foot massages, and we do various different things around the body, but we don't talk about going for a yoni massage on a monthly basis. And why not? We talk about penetration, and porn is rife and sex is all over the place, but we don't talk about the maintenance and the care of the yoni. And there's so much to her. We don't talk about the maintenance and the care of the womb, and there's so much that moves through the womb. So I hope that more is activated here on the coast, and yeah, it becomes your Friday afternoon drinks. What are you doing? Yeah, just going for a yoni massage. I'm hoping that conversation becomes more standardized as we normalize this work. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we close for this morning?
No, I think we're good. I mean, just as you say, that my invitation is for this to be an ongoing conversation. It's stuff that is just constantly unfolding, and we're expanding into it. I've been doing so much of this work in the online space. I run a training that is so centered around this type of work, but it is exactly as you described, Lee. It's about doing the work at home on your own, which it has its own power to it. For me to come into group space and share this in real time with women, in the live space, is so precious. And the last time I was really doing this work in person, in groups, was with my teacher. So, we were holding these types of workshops together around Ayurveda and healing Uttari Vasti and, the Yoni and all of that kind of work in collective. And so for me to kind of be stepping into this, my teacher is retired now, she doesn't teach anymore in the formal sense, to be stepping into this work and offering it with you, it feels like another important stepping up into that space of being the teacher. And as I age and move towards perimenopause myself, into those elder years, it's part of being a space holder at the potent portal in my life that I'm at now, is those years of experience and that lived wisdom.
And thank you so much. I feel so deeply honored that a woman of your experience and wisdom and longevity in the work, there are a lot of women that are passionate about this work, and they've been doing it for a short period of time, yet there's all of their heart and soul, and I love these women. And I'm also about longevity. I'm also about the women who have been in the space for a long time. You know, I lost my virginity when I was 16 years old, and it's not a young age, but I have been deeply dedicated to my sexual exploration since 16. It's been a driving force. And so there's been a lot of energy around all of my sexuality. And when I came into the space with Sarah Jane Perman 7 years ago, everything made sense. And everything that I'd practiced in the 20 years prior now had formalization around it and a container around it for me to understand that I've been doing this work since I was 16 years old. And so, you know, really having that with you, the longevity, the understanding, the portals that you've moved through as a woman, I feel so deeply honored that it was an immediate yes when I just sort of said, hey, should we do some group Yoni steaming, as a very casual thing. I love that it's become, it's taken the form that it's taken. And I really am celebrating your trust, because I know that you have your trust to work with me and to co-facilitate in this way, because I know that you've worked with extraordinary teachers in your life. So I'm feeling so honored and so juiced up, and I just can't wait to play in this way.
Same. Thank you, Lee. There's one small thing I want to add, which I just thought of, which is around for women, because we've talked a lot about sex and sexual expression and the sexual trauma and that side. I also want to mention that this would be an amazing process for women who've had experiences in childbirth that weren't optimum. So many women have had unexpected outcomes in the process of birthing their children. And this work is, I work as a doula. I've been present for many births and watched lots of humans come into the world, which is just such blessed work to do. And I've also seen some traumatic births, and I've seen the aftermath of those. And so this work can be very healing. And it doesn't have to be that you're immediately postnatal. You know, this could have been a child that you gave birth to 20 years ago. There's still, we can still unravel the trauma. So the timelines become very different when we're doing this work. You know, the body remembers things differently in terms of time. So you might have had a trauma 50 years ago that is still held in the body that can be released in this work. And likewise, it could have been something that happened last week. So don't be too caught up on the timeline piece, because that's definitely something that is very amorphous in this work. And yeah, for women who have got any kind of childbirth residual threads of stuff they'd like to work through, this would be a beautiful portal for that too.
Amazing. And yes, thank you for bringing that timeline piece in, because we often intellectualize that we've healed something, and we don't realize how much the cells store things. What about women who haven't yet had babies, or are interested in having babies, or are preparing themselves to become pregnant, or do not have any desire at all?
All of that is welcome. I mean, for the women who don't desire to have babies, physical babies, then we think about, what is it that you're birthing in your life? What are your creative projects? What is it that you're bringing to fruition and conceiving of that you're putting out into the world, whether that's creative work or, you know, your work in the world? And for those who are preparing, even if it's like an abstract, you know, at some point in the future, oh my goodness, this is just the best preparation you can do to create a clean, conscious and pure portal. I mean, actually, I'll tell you a very brief funny story. My daughter was not expected. I did not plan to have a baby at 45. And obviously I'm absolutely delighted I did. She's an angel and everyone in our family adores her. Yes. However, before I met my partner, because I had a divorce and then there'd been a few years between meeting my now partner, there was a period of time in which I was very intensively doing this work after divorce, and I'd had my 4 children, and actually I really believed that that was my last son, was my last child. So I was doing a lot of cleansing and clearing, a lot of journaling, a lot of ritual, ceremony, release, yoni smoking, womb massage, you name it. I was deep in the portal, and part of that was because I wanted to call in a new partner, you know, after I had recovered from divorce, and it took a few years. There was a window of a few years in between, but I knew I wanted to repartner, and I wanted to come into that relationship from a very clean and energetically like translucent place. And so I was working hard on all of that, and I kind of feel like I almost did a bit too much of a good job, because not only did I welcome in a phenomenal partner who I'm in a beautiful relationship with, but we very quickly manifested this beautiful angelic daughter. And part of me feels like, gosh, it's because all the channels were open, everything, the portal was like, you know, couldn't have been more of a clear vessel for which she was able to just drop on into. So yeah, there's that.
There's that. So yes, if you don't want to get too clean and you've decided that something is definitely not happening, this comes with a cautionary small print that you might become so clean that you bring forth things that you had no intention of bringing forth.
Yeah. I mean, all jokes aside, this work creates magnetism, because people feel energetic purity. They feel, and I'm not talking about purity in the Christian sense. I want to be really clear about this. It's not about like sex is dirty or you've done dirty things and we need to clean them. It's not anything to do with that sort of like moral judgment around sexuality. It's not that. It's an internal purity when our energetic, actually the chakras are aligned and resonant and the vibration is very clear, and people feel that, and it's some of the most potent and important work you can do. This is why this work heals our relationships, whether it's your partnership or your relationship with your children. You know, it could be more powerful. I'm not joking when I say this, even than formal therapy. Like, just to come in with a clear energetic presence and be in partnership, be in relationship, be in the parenting role, be a friend that comes as a clear, clean portal. It's a rare thing these days. It's very rare. And so people feel that, and there's a magnetism there that is created that has a lot of unexpected outcomes. A lot of unexpected magnetism will happen as a result of this work.
And I am in absolute agreement with you, and I know that when you talk about the potency of it, and potentially grander than formal therapy, because formal therapy is driven by the mind, and we are energy beings, and when we really focus on these creative portals, which is what they are, it goes beyond anything that the mind can drive us towards. And I wanted to run a little bit of a test after we had gone through our process. And I spent time with an ex-lover of mine a few days ago. And I made things very clear with him. I said, don't try anything on. The sexual energy between us is incredibly strong. I don't think that there's anybody else in my life where it's just he and I can have the biggest arguments and want to, you know, tear one another's eyes out of one another's faces, and I still want to make love to him, and he's the same with me. And I just said, you know, there's no room for this. This is friendship, and that's it. And he looked at me when we saw one another, and he said, I'm going to keep on trying because that's what I'm going to do. He said, but there's something different in you. There's something different in you, and I can feel it. He said, there's a lightness in you, and there's a, you know, I'm always a woman of clarity. I'm mostly 99% a woman of clarity, but he had said there's something more potent about you. And I said, yeah, like, welcome to a well-smoked yoni, you know. Welcome to womb. This is where it's at. So that is, you know, that is the invitation. I know that the work that I do accelerates things. I don't like to muck around. I like to do as little as possible for the greatest results. And I know that you're the same, not just because you have 5 children, but because of the woman that you are. So this invitation is for the creators of the world who have a desire, exactly as Katie said, to create that purity within self in order to magnetize whatever it is that you are desiring to call in. It could be something material, it could be human beings, it could be new practices, new opportunities, new possibilities. Yes, we can create the vision board, and I'm sitting staring at mine, which only has one element to complete before this 2019 vision board is fully complete and we begin to do it again. You can do the vision board, you can do all of the journaling, you can talk things out with people, and you can do the womb and yoni work and watch magic unfold in your life that you have not ever witnessed before. So come and play, 28th of July, 8 women in the space. There are currently 5 tickets available. I will drop the link in my bio. You can find more stuff about it on Facebook. You can go and learn more about Katie on her Instagram, in her books that she's written. This is not a heady decision. You will feel it. If it is your time to be in this space, in this moment in time, in the next 3 weeks, you will know. And you can try and rearrange your mind and argue with yourself and tell yourself that it's not quite right, but your body will know. And if it does, we so look forward to welcoming you into the space. And that is us. Are we complete?
We are complete. Thank you so much, Lee.
Thank you, Katie. I'll see you soon, darling. Have a good weekend, everyone. Ciao all.